The night was cold and still when a group of U.S. soldiers entered the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. The forest stretched out for miles, filled with twisted trees, swamps, and thick mist that clung to the ground like a blanket. Their boots crunched against the damp earth as they moved in formation, rifles in hand, eyes scanning the darkness. The mission seemed simple: patrol the area, check for signs of unusual activity, and return to base before dawn. But from the very first step, inside those woods, something felt off. The Pine Barrens had a reputation. Everyone in New Jersey had heard the stories. The legends of the Jersey Devil, a winged beast said to haunt the forest. Most people laughed at it. Monsters were the stuff of campfire tales, not real life. Yet tonight, as the soldiers walked deeper into the trees, the legend didn't seem so funny anymore. The forest was too quiet. There were no crickets, no owls, no night animals at all. Just the sound of boots hitting the dirt and the soft clicking of gear shifting as the men marched. Even the wind seemed afraid to blow. The silence pressed in on them, and every man could feel it. Something about this place wasn't right. Sergeant Miller, the squad leader, kept his voice low as he gave commands. "Keep your eyes open. Stay sharp. We don't know what we still find out here." Private Lewis, the youngest of the group, tried to lighten the mood. "Relax, Sarge. Worst thing we still run into is a raccoon." But no one laughed. The men just kept moving, their nerves showing in the way their flashlights cut nervously through the dark, bouncing off twisted branches that looked like clawed hands reaching from the shadows. Every step deeper into the Pine Barrens felt heavier. The soldiers had patrolled forest before, but this was different. The trees grew close together, blocking out the stars and the moon. The deeper they went, the darker it became, until it felt like they were walking into the mouth of something alive. The air grew colder, and the mist thickened around their boots. Private Harris whispered, "Feels like the trees are watching us." Sergeant Miller quickly snapped back, "Quiet, stay focused." But secretly, Miller felt it too. He'd been in combat, seen firefights and ambushes, but this forest gave him a different kind of fear, the kind that crawled up your spine and made the hair on your arms stand up. The squad reached an old dirt path, overgrown with weeds and nearly swallowed by the forest. On the side of the trail, they spotted the remains of something strange. A deer carcass, half-eaten, its ribs exposed, the ground around it soaked in dried blood. The kill looked fresh, but there were no tracks around it. No wolf prints, no bear tracks, nothing. Private Lewis muttered, That's seps not right." One of the older soldiers, Corporal Davis, grunted. "Could be coyotes." But even he didn't sound convinced. The squad pushed forward, moving cautiously now. Their flashlights flickered against the fog, creating shifting shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Shapes seemed to move in the darkness, branches bending, shadows stretching, but when the men turned to look, nothing was there. The silence grew heavier the deeper they went. No one spoke anymore. The only sounds were the steady breaths of the soldiers and the crunch of boots on dead leaves. The forest felt endless, as if it was swallowing them whole. Then, somewhere above them, a sharp snap. All the men froze. They lifted their rifles, aiming into the dark trees above. Their flashlights swept the branches. But nothing was there. Only fog, branches, and more shadows. "Could Seb been an animal?" Davis whispered. But deep down, they all knew. This didn't feel like an animal. It felt like something bigger, something smarter. The squad pressed on, nerves tightening with every step. The path twisted, leading them deeper into the barrens. The ground turned soft and swampy, sucking at their boots. The mist grew so thick it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. And still, no sounds of life, not even insects. Private Harris finally broke the silence, his voice shaking. "Ever hear the story of the Jersey Devil?" Several soldiers groaned. "Dawn sets start," one muttered. But Harris kept talking, almost as if he couldn't stop himself. "They say it was born over 300 years ago. Mother leads Sep's 13th child, came out screaming, with wings, hooves, and a head like a horse. It killed the midwife and flew up the chimney. Been haunting these woods ever since." "Enough," Miller snapped. "Legends don't sit kill, Stay alert. Still, the story lingered in their minds as they marched. The silence, the fog, the feeling of being hunted, it all matched the tales they had heard as children. The further they went, the more the men felt it, that crawling sensation, like eyes in the dark were watching them. The forest seemed alive, every branch and shadow holding secrets. And though they didn't want to admit it, the soldiers began to believe that maybe the Jersey Devil wasn't just a story after all. The first part of the night patrol was supposed to be easy, just a walk through the woods, but already the squad could sense the truth. Something was waiting for them in the Pine Barrens, and whatever it wasn't human. The squad continued their patrol, moving deeper into the Pine Barrens. The forest grew thicker around them, the trees twisting like black skeletons reaching for the sky. Mist swirled between the trunks, and every now and then, a cold breeze slipped through, making the men shiver under their gear. At first, the soldiers thought the forest was just old and strange, nothing more, but soon they began to notice things that didn't make sense. Private Lewis was the first to point it out. "Hey, look at this," he whispered, shining his flashlight on the side of a tree. The beam revealed deep claw marks carved into the bark, long, sharp gouges that ran several feet down the trunk. They weren't the kind of scratches left by a small animal. They were too high, too wide, and too powerful. Corporal Davis frowned as he ran his gloved fingers across the marks. "That Sep's no coyote. Not even a bear could cut this deep." Sergeant Miller narrowed his eyes. "Could be an axe. People come out here to chop wood." But the more he stared at those marks, the less convinced he became. The cuts didn't look like they came from a blade. They looked like they had been ripped into the tree by something with claws. The men exchanged uneasy looks before pressing forward. A few minutes later, they found more signs. Broken branches littered the ground, as though something huge had passed through and knocked them down. Sap oozed from splintered wood, and leaves were crushed flat in strange patterns that didn't match human footprints. Private Harris bent down, squinting at the ground. "Look at this. What kind of track is that?" The soldiers crowded around his flashlight. In the mud, they saw a print, large, misshapen, with what looked like cloven hooves. But the strange part was the size. Each print was at least a foot long, and the stride was wide, as though whatever made them had powerful legs. "Could be a horse," Davis muttered. Though he sounded unsure, "In the middle of the woods?" Lewis asked. "And at night?" No one answered. The squad moved again, this time slower, flashlights sweeping across the forest floor. The more they looked, the more prints they saw, crisscrossing the trail like something had been circling the area. Each time they spotted one, the men grew quieter. Not long after, they came across another sign, strips of fur tangled in the branches. The fur was black, coarse, and much longer than deer hair. Private Harris picked one up carefully. It felt wiry, almost like a horse's mane, but thicker and sharper at the ends. "What the hell leaves fur like this?" he asked. Nobody had an answer. The forest seemed to close in tighter around them. The men started to feel watched again, just like before. The silence was too heavy, and the mist too thick. Shadows stretched in unnatural ways, and their flashlights picked up movements they couldn't confirm. The sense of being hunted grew with every step. Private Lewis tried to make light of it. "Bet it's Set's just some big dog running around out here." But the way his voice shook betrayed his fear. Then they found something that made their blood run cold. In a small clearing, half hidden by bushes, lay another carcass. This time, it was a fox, ripped apart and scattered across the ground. Bones cracked, flesh torn, and the body twisted in ways no natural predator would leave it. The wounds weren't clean, they were savage. Corporal Davis cursed under his breath. "This isn't Stet normal. Whatever Stet's out here isn't Stet hunting for food, it's Stet's killing for the sake of it." The squad grew tense, rifles clutched tighter, flashlights darting over every shadow. The clearing suddenly felt like a trap, as though stepping into it had put them in the center of something's attention. Sergeant Miller spoke firmly. "Eyes up. Weapons ready. We keep moving. Don't stop unless I say." The men obeyed, but fear crawled deeper into their minds. Every broken branch, every snapped twig, Every strange track told the same story. Something large, something unnatural, was moving through these woods. And it was close. As they pushed forward, the signs grew more disturbing. More claw marks on trees. Higher this time, so high that whatever made them had to be tall. A broken stump that looked as though it had been bitten through. The wood splintered by enormous jaws. And above all, those tracks, hoofprints in the mud, circling, crossing, leading both ahead of them and behind. It was as if the creature had been watching them for some time. Private Harris whispered again, his nerves breaking. "This isn't Set an animal. This is him. It Set's the devil." "Quiet," Miller snapped, his voice sharper than before. "Stay calm. It Set's just signs. Nothing we can Set handle." But deep down, Miller didn't believe his own words. He'd seen predators before, studied tracks in combat zones, but nothing like this. Nothing about this was normal. The squad tightened formation, their boots crunching against the dead leaves as they moved deeper. Each man kept his finger close to the trigger, eyes darting into the mist, breaths quick and shallow. Every sign pointed to one thing: something unnatural was out there, and it was following them. The forest no longer felt empty, it felt alive, and whatever lived in it wanted them to know it was there. The squad pressed on, rifles raised, flashlights cutting through the thick mist. The strange signs they had seen, claw marks, hoofprints, carcasses, clung to their minds like heavy chains. None of the soldiers spoke now. The woods were too quiet, too heavy, and each man felt the same thing. Something was out there watching. The silence itself was unnatural. In any normal forest, even at night, there would be sound: an owl calling, leaves rustling, maybe a raccoon scurrying in the underbrush. But here, nothing. The only noise came from the soldiers' own footsteps, the faint click of gear shifting, and the sound of their breathing. Private Lewis whispered, "This place feels dead." Sergeant Miller gave him a sharp look. "Stay focused. Watch your sector." But even Miller felt the truth in Lewis's words. The forest wasn't just quiet, it was empty. No sign of life at all, and in that emptiness, the smallest sound felt loud. Every crack of a branch underfoot, every shift of a strap, every breath, it all seemed to echo far more than it should. Then it began. A sound drifted through the fog, faint but sharp, an unearthly screech. It was high-pitched, almost like metal grinding against metal, but twisted with something alive in it. The sound seemed to crawl across their skin, raising goosebumps instantly. All the men froze. Their flashlights darted into the mist, rifles snapping upward. Private Harris whispered, "What the hell was that?" No one answered. The screech came again, louder this time from deeper in the forest. It wasn't like any animal they knew. It wasn't a fox's scream or an owl's call or even a coyote's howl. This sound was unnatural, bone-chilling, and full of something that felt like anger. Sergeant Miller forced his voice to stay steady. "Hold your positions, eyes open." The squad stood frozen, hearts pounding, rifles aimed at the dark. Then came another sound. This time, the heavy whoosh of wings. Something massive beat the air above the trees. The sound was deep, powerful, like a storm wind slamming down into the forest. Branches shook, and mist swirled overhead, as if something had passed just beyond their sight. Private Lewis muttered under his breath, "That Sep's not a bird." The squad shifted uneasily, eyes snapping upward, searching the treetops. Their flashlights caught nothing but twisted branches and rolling fog, but the sound of wings lingered in the night, circling, moving just beyond the edge of their lights. Then silence again. It was worse than the noise. The men stood still, straining to hear anything. Their nerves stretched thin, their breaths came quick, their fingers tight on their triggers. A sudden crack echoed from their left, branches snapping under weight, heavy weight. The squad whipped their rifles toward the sound, flashlights cutting through the darkness. For a moment, all they saw was fog rolling between the trees. But then, deep in the mist, something moved. A shadow, tall, hunched, and quick, slipped between the trees, gone before they could get a good look. "Contact," Davis whispered. "Hold fire," Miller barked. "Don't sit, shoot until you see it." But his voice betrayed a crack of fear. The soldiers swept their lights in every direction, but the forest gave nothing back. Only shadows, only fog. Then the screech came again, this time much closer. The sound ripped through the air like claws on glass, echoing across the trees. The squad flinched, some men raising rifles higher, ready to fire. Private Harris muttered shakily, "It's Sets hunting us." No one argued. A low rustling followed, circling them, first from the right, then the left, then behind. The sound was everywhere, moving fast. Something in the darkness was playing with them, surrounding them, testing them. Miller tried to steady his men. "Stay tight, watch your angles. Don't panic." But panic was exactly what was spreading. The forest felt alive with movement now, the fog shifting in strange ways, as if something massive was gliding just out of sight. Then came the sound that broke what little calm the men had left. A long, slow growl rolled out from the trees ahead. It was deep, rumbling, unnatural, like something old, something not meant to exist. The sound seemed to shake the air itself, vibrating in their chests. Every man's stomach dropped. Private Lewis whispered in a trembling voice, "That Sip's not a bear, is it?" No one answered. No one could. The growl stopped, replaced by silence once more. But the silence wasn't empty this time. It was heavy, charged, like the moment before a storm. Every soldier felt it. The thing out there wasn't just making noise. It was letting them know they were being hunted. Suddenly, snap, a branch cracked directly behind them. The squad spun around, rifles ready, flashlights blazing, but nothing was there. The forest mocked them with shadows. Then above them, the sound of wings again, closer, stronger, beating the air in heavy bursts. The mist swirled violently, as though something massive had just soared overhead. One soldier swore he saw a shape cross the moonlight for a split second, something with wings far too large to be natural, a silhouette with long claws and a twisted head. But when he blinked, it was gone. The men were shaking now, hearts pounding like war drums. Every sense screamed at them to run, but training kept them locked in place. Miller's voice cut through the terror, firm but strained. "We move now. Stay sharp. Stay together." The soldiers obeyed, falling back into formation, flashlights trembling as they scanned the mist. But each step forward felt like a step deeper into the hunting ground of something they couldn't understand. The sounds didn't stop. The screeches, the growls, the wings, always circling, always close, always just out of sight. The forest was alive with it, and the men knew one thing for certain. They were no longer the hunters. They were the prey. The soldiers pushed deeper into the forest, their nerves stretched like wires ready to snap. Every sound, the flap of wings, the crack of branches, the strange screeches had driven fear into them. But now the worst part was not the noise. It was the silence in between. The forest seemed to be waiting. Sergeant Miller led the squad down the narrow trail, his rifle raised, flashlight beam shaking slightly in his grip. He had seen combat before, had been under fire, but nothing compared to this. At least in war, you could see the enemy. Here, the enemy was everywhere and nowhere at once. Private Harris whispered, "It's Seps following us. I can feel it." "Quiet," Miller ordered, though his own voice was tight. The squad slowed as the mist grew thicker, rolling like smoke between the trees. Their flashlights could barely cut through it. The forest ahead looked endless, a wall of white and shadow. Then, without warning, a sound split the night. It was a scream, high, shrill, and twisted. It echoed through the barrens, bouncing off the trees, clawing at their ears. The men flinched, rifles snapping upward. It wasn't an animal cry, it wasn't human either, it was something wrong, something unnatural. Private Lewis muttered, "Oh God." The mist shifted. The trees ahead bent slightly, as if something heavy had moved through them. A shadow flickered, tall and wide, but gone before their flashlights could pin it down. The men froze, the silence stretched, and then they saw them. Two glowing red eyes, burning like hot coals, staring at them from the mist. Every soldier's heart dropped at once. The eyes hovered high above the ground, unblinking, watching with a cold intelligence. They weren't the eyes of an animal hunting for food. They were the eyes of something that enjoyed fear. The squad held their rifles steady, but not one man pulled the trigger. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The only sound was the pounding of their hearts. Then the figure stepped forward. At first, it was only a silhouette in the fog, a dark, towering shape. Then their flashlights caught more detail. The creature's body was long and thin, almost skeletal, but with muscles stretched tight under dark skin. Its wings unfolded slowly, like torn sails, massive and leathery, stretching wider than a man was tall. Its head was the worst part, elongated, horse-like, with twisted horns rising from its skull. The mouth opened to reveal jagged, uneven teeth, and from deep inside its chest came a low, guttural growl that rumbled through the ground. Private Harris Sitt's voice cracked in terror. That's Set's not human." The creature hissed, then threw back its head and released another scream, so loud, so shrill, it rattled in their bones. The soldiers stumbled back, some covering their ears, others gripping their rifles tighter. The Jersey Devil spread its wings wider, as if to make itself even larger, even more horrifying. Shadows bent around it, and the mist seemed to thicken as it stepped closer. Its eyes glowed brighter, burning holes through the darkness. Miller shouted, "Hold your ground," but even he couldn't hide the fear in his voice. The creature moved suddenly. 1 second it stood still, the next it darted forward with unnatural speed, wings snapping against the air. Branches broke, mist exploded around it, and the ground trembled under its weight. The squad opened fire. Gunshots cracked through the night, echoing across the forest. Muzzle flashes lit up the fog like lightning, and the stench of gunpowder filled the air. Bullets tore through branches, sparks flying from ricochets. But the devil didn't fall. It jerked and twitched as if hit, but it kept moving, screaming in rage. Its wings flapped violently, creating bursts of wind that nearly knocked the men off their feet. One soldier stumbled backward, his flashlight beams swinging wildly, catching a clear image of the creature's face. Long snout, sharp teeth, eyes glowing like fire. It looked directly at him. The soldier froze in terror. Unable to move, the devil lunged forward, claws slashing through the air. But Miller shoved the man aside at the last second. The claws scraped against a tree trunk, carving deep, fresh marks into the wood. "Move," Miller shouted. "Keep firing." The squad poured more rounds into the mist, flashes lighting up the nightmare shape of the Jersey Devil as it circled them. Its screeches grew louder, angrier, filling the night with chaos. The men were shaking, firing blindly, trying to push the creature back, but deep down, they all felt the same fear. Bullets weren't enough. This thing wasn't like anything they had faced before. It wasn't natural. It wasn't human. It was something older, something darker, something that wanted them to know exactly what it was before it killed them. The devil pulled back for a moment, wings snapping hard as it rose above the trees. The men's flashlights followed, catching only glimpses of its twisted form through the fog. For a moment, it hovered in the air, eyes glowing, wings spread wide. Then, with one final scream that shook the forest, it vanished back into the mist. The silence that followed was unbearable. The squad stood frozen, rifles still raised, hearts pounding, eyes wide. Every man knew what he had seen, though none wanted to believe it. Private Lewis whispered, barely able to speak, "That was real." Sergeant Miller swallowed hard. His voice was low, grim. "Stay sharp. Set's not done with us yet." And though the forest had fallen silent again, every man in that squad knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The Jersey Devil had shown itself, and it was hunting. The forest was still shaking from the last scream of the Jersey Devil. The squad stood frozen, rifles raised, flashlights flickering through the mist. No one spoke, no one even breathed too loudly. They were soldiers trained for war, but this wasn't a battlefield, it was a nightmare. Sergeant Miller scanned the tree line, his voice tight. "Eyes up, don't let it circle behind us again." The men obeyed, forming a defensive ring, flashlights sweeping into the darkness. The mist curled thickly, hiding everything beyond a few feet. Every shadow looked alive. Every branch seemed ready to move. Then the sound returned. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The heavy beating of wings filled the air. It circled them again, above the treetops, too fast to track. The sound grew louder, closer, until branches began to snap overhead. The men lifted their rifles, aiming skyward, but the fog swallowed everything. Suddenly, a scream tore through the night, louder than before, sharp and piercing like glass shattering in their ears. The men winced, some dropping to one knee, others pressing their helmets tight. And then it came. The devil dropped from the sky like a falling shadow, wings snapping against the air. It slammed into the ground just feet from the squad, its massive form towering over them, eyes glowing red, teeth bared in a horrifying snarl. Fire! Miller roared. The night exploded with gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit the mist as the men unleashed a storm of bullets. The devil shrieked, wings thrashing violently, dirt and leaves whipping into the air. Some shots struck, jerking its body, but the creature didn't fall. Instead, it charged. With terrifying speed, it lunged forward, claws sweeping. One soldier, Private Daniels, was too slow to move. The devil's talons tore through his vest, lifting him off his feet and slamming him into the ground. He screamed in agony as the claws ripped into his gear, shredding metal and fabric as if it were paper. "Get him out," Miller shouted. Two soldiers dragged Daniels back, firing with their free hands, but the devil pursued, screeching so loudly it rattled their bones. Its wings flapped hard, sending a blast of wind that knocked another man flat on his back. Corporal Davis raised his rifle and fired point blank into the creature's chest. The bullets ripped through flesh, spraying dark blood onto the trees. The devil staggered but didn't stop. Instead, it roared in fury, its jaws snapping open. The sound that came out wasn't just a roar. It was something deeper, something unnatural, as if the forest itself was screaming through it. The men fired more, the air thick with smoke and thunder, but the devil kept moving, circling, slashing with claws, snapping its jaws. Every time it struck, it moved too fast to aim properly. The squad was falling apart, their tight formation breaking as they scrambled to survive. Private Harris stumbled back, flashlight beams swinging wildly, when suddenly the devil dropped low and swiped at him. Its claws slashed across his chest, tearing through his armor. He cried out, blood soaking his uniform, before two men grabbed him and pulled him behind cover. "Medic!" someone shouted. But there was no time. The devil lunged again, this time leaping high into the air, its wings beating like thunder. It swooped down toward the squad, claws outstretched. The soldiers dove aside as it crashed into the dirt, claws gouging the ground where they had just been standing. Leaves, dirt, and rocks exploded into the air. Miller fired his rifle until the clip ran dry, shouting, "Reload, keep firing." Donset let it close in. The devil rose to its full height, wings stretching wide, blocking out the little moonlight that pierced the fog. It was a nightmare come alive, hooves stomping the ground, claws dripping with blood, red eyes burning like fire. The men fired again and again, but it seemed endless, unstoppable. Daniels, still bleeding on the ground, groaned in pain. The devil's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. With a screech, it lunged. "No," Miller bellowed, sprinting forward. He fired a burst straight into the devil's face. The bullets struck, knocking its head back, and for the first time the creature staggered. It roared in fury, swinging one massive claw toward Miller. The sergeant dove aside just in time. The claw struck a tree, carving deep marks into the trunk with a sound like tearing metal. The men pulled Daniels back, dragging him into the shadows as the devil spun toward them again. Private Lewis screamed as the creature's tail whipped out of nowhere, slamming into him like a club. He flew backward, hitting the ground with a sickening thud, his rifle skidding out of reach. The devil spread its wings again, flapping hard, rising into the air. The men fired upward, their flashlights catching glimpses of its twisted face as it circled above. It let out another scream, a sound so loud it rattled their helmets and made their ears bleed. The forest seemed to shake with it. "Fall back," Miller ordered. "Now! Move!" The squad began to retreat, dragging their wounded, firing bursts to keep the devil back. But the creature wasn't finished. It swooped low, snapping branches, chasing them through the trees. Its claws slashed out, ripping bark, its wings tearing through branches like paper. The men ran, boots pounding the earth, hearts racing, but no matter how fast they moved, the sound of wings followed. The devil was hunting them. Private Harris, bleeding but alive, whispered through clenched teeth as they dragged him. "Bullets don't stop it, nothing stops it." Miller didn't answer. He just kept his men moving because he knew one thing. The Jersey Devil wasn't trying to kill them quickly. It was playing with them. And the hunt had only just begun. "Fall back. Move. Now." Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the chaos. The soldiers didn't need to be told twice. With their wounded in tow, they turned and ran into the depths of the Pine Barrens. Their boots pounded against the wet earth, flashlights bobbing wildly, shadows stretching across the mist. Behind them, the sound of wings followed, loud, powerful, and relentless. The forest exploded with noise. Branches snapped overhead, leaves whipped through the air, and the shrill scream of the Jersey Devil shook the night. It wasn't giving up. It wanted them. Private Harris was half dragged, half carried by two men, his chest bleeding from the earlier attack. He winced in pain with every step, whispering hoarsely, "It sets still there, it sets right behind us." And he was right. The glow of red eyes flickered in the mist, always just behind them, always closing in. Every time a soldier dared to look back, they saw its shape, a towering shadow, wings stretched wide, slipping between the trees with terrifying speed. "Keep moving," Miller barked. His own chest heaved, his legs burning, but he refused to slow down. "Donset, stop. Donset, look back." The squad crashed through undergrowth, the forest tearing at them with claws of its own. Branches ripped uniforms, mud sucked at their boots, and the fog blinded their path. Still they ran, because the moment they slowed, they knew the devil would be upon them. Then came the rush of wings, whoosh, 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 swooping closer. "Down," Miller shouted. The men dove forward, just as the devil swooped low, claws slashing through the air. Its talons caught a tree instead, shredding bark and sending splinters flying. The force of the impact made the ground shake. The soldiers scrambled to their feet, firing blindly upward. Gunshots cracked, muzzle flashes lighting the mist, but the creature only screamed in rage, circling back into the darkness. The squad pressed on, hearts hammering, lungs burning. They weren't fighting anymore. They were running for survival. Private Lewis stumbled as roots snagged his boot, sending him crashing to the ground. His flashlight spun into the mud, beam pointing upward. For a split second, he saw it clear as day. The Jersey Devil perched on a branch above, crouched like a predator ready to pounce. Its wings were half folded, its claws gripping the wood, its eyes glowing bright red, its head tilted slowly. Watching him was something like amusement. Lewis froze, too terrified to move. His hands fumbled for his rifle, but it was just out of reach. "Lewis, get up," Miller shouted, rushing back. He grabbed the soldier by his vest and yanked him to his feet just as the devil dropped. The creature slammed into the ground where Lewis had been, claws digging deep gouges into the soil. The squad fired again, muzzle flashes sparking in the mist, forcing the devil back a step. But it didn't retreat far. It hissed, spread its wings, and let out another scream that echoed across the entire forest. It was playing with them. The men ran again, adrenaline giving strength to their tired legs. Harris groaned in pain as he was dragged. Lewis stumbled along in shock, and Daniels, still wounded, could barely keep his eyes open. The squad was falling apart, and Miller knew it. "We steer close," he shouted, though he had no idea if it was true. "Keep going. Push." The forest grew thicker, the path vanishing into twisting trees. The mist was so dense now that it felt like running through smoke. Visibility dropped to only a few feet. The soldiers tripped, crashed into roots, scraped against bark, but still forced themselves forward. Then came another sound, the thud of hooves. Not behind them, not above. Beside them, The devil wasn't just chasing, it was running alongside, hidden in the fog, keeping pace like a wolf hunting prey. Every few seconds, the men saw glimpses, a wing snapping open, a tail whipping through the mist, glowing eyes flashing between the trunks. "Its set's hurting us," Davis gasped. Miller's heart sank. He knew Davis was right. The devil wasn't striking to kill, it was pushing them, driving them deeper into the woods, away from escape. Then, out of nowhere, the devil struck again. It lunged from the left, bursting through the mist, wings slamming outward. The blast of wind knocked two men off their feet. Its claws raked across the ground, tearing through soil and roots as it tried to grab Harris, who screamed as he was yanked from the arms of the soldiers carrying him. "Harris!" Lewis shouted, lunging forward. The devil dragged Harris a few feet before the squad opened fire. Bullets ripped into the mist, sparks and blood flying. The devil screeched in fury, dropping Harris and leaping back into the trees with impossible speed. Two men grabbed Harris, dragging him upright. His face was pale, his breath shallow, but he was alive, barely. The squad moved again, faster now, desperation pushing them onward. The forest seemed endless. The mist grew thicker, the ground muddier, the trees tighter together, and always the sound of wings behind them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Sometimes above, sometimes beside, sometimes right behind. Private Lewis finally snapped, shouting into the darkness. "Why won't it stop?" His voice echoed, raw with terror. The answer came in the form of another scream, so close, so loud, it felt like knives tearing through their ears. The devil's voice filled the forest, filled their skulls, filled their very bones. The men stumbled, some dropping to their knees from the sheer force of the sound. Miller dragged them up, shouting, "Dawn, sit, stop, not now, move." They ran again, blindly, crashing through the trees until finally the forest thinned. Ahead, through the mist, they saw it, the faint outline of the road where their vehicles were parked. Relief surged through them, the way out, safety. But the devil wasn't set done. With a final, bone-shaking screech, it swooped low one last time, smashing through the treetops. Its wings spread wide, its claws slashing down, its glowing eyes fixed on the squad. The men fired every last round they had, bullets lighting up the night as they sprinted for the road. The devil shrieked in rage, pulling up at the last second, its massive form vanishing back into the mist. The squad stumbled onto the road, gasping for air. Dragging the wounded with them, they collapsed near their vehicles, rifles empty, hearts still hammering. For a moment, the forest was silent again. But every man knew the truth. The devil hadn't given up. It had simply let them go, because the hunt was never finished. The squad spilled out onto the cracked road, gasping for breath, mud dripping from their boots, uniforms torn and bloodied. Their vehicles waited just a short distance ahead, dark silhouettes in the fog. For a moment, no one moved. They just collapsed where they stood, every chest heaving, every hand shaking. The forest behind them was quiet, too quiet. It was as if the Pine Barrens had swallowed the nightmare whole, hiding it again in its endless shadows. Private Davis slumped against the side of a truck, blood running down his temple. His voice cracked when he spoke. Did we lose it?" Nobody answered right away. Each man was listening, straining their ears for the sound of wings, for the scream that had haunted them all night, but nothing came, only silence. Finally, Sergeant Miller spoke, his voice low and raw. For now, the words settled over them like a weight. For now, not gone, not defeated, just waiting. The men began dragging the wounded into the vehicles. Harris was barely conscious, his uniform soaked through with blood. Daniels groaned with every movement, his chest clawed open, armor shredded. Lewis shook uncontrollably, his face pale as he tried to load his rifle with trembling hands, even though the magazine was already empty. "Medic kit, now!" Miller barked, and one soldier scrambled to obey. They worked fast, wrapping wounds, pressing bandages, anything to stop the bleeding. The air smelled of blood, gunpowder, and fear. As the men worked, Davis looked back at the tree line. The mist hung thick and heavy, curling like smoke. He couldn't see more than a few feet inside, but he felt it, eyes watching, waiting, hidden in the dark. He whispered, almost to himself, "It let us go." Lewis snapped his head toward him, his voice high and panicked. "What do you mean, let us go? We fought it." "No," Davis interrupted. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "Don, sit, you get it. It could sit, killed us, all of us. Anytime it wanted. It didn't sit, it just chased us." The men fell silent. Deep down, each of them knew he was right. The devil hadn't been hunting for food. It had been toying with them like a cat with a mouse. Miller climbed into the driver's seat of one of the trucks, hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He wanted to tell his men they were safe, that they had made it, that the worst was behind them, but he couldn't. He didn't believe it himself. The engines roared to life, headlights cutting through the fog. The sound was almost comforting. Something normal in a night that had been anything but. The soldiers loaded up, cramming into the vehicles, every eye still darting toward the woods. As they began to drive, the squad sat in heavy silence. No one joked, no one bragged, no one even spoke. The only sounds were the rumble of the engines and the faint moans of the wounded. The mist thinned as the trucks pushed deeper along the road. Slowly, the black sky began to fade to gray. Dawn was coming. When the first rays of sunlight broke through the trees, the men finally breathed easier. The daylight didn't erase the memory of what they had seen, but it gave them something to cling to. For the first time all night, the forest looked normal again. Just trees, just shadows, just mist. The kind of place they would have walked through without a second thought, only hours before. But now they knew better. No one would ever look at these woods the same way again. By the time they reached base, the trucks were covered in mud, the men inside battered and broken. Medics rushed to meet them, hauling stretchers, asking questions, but the soldiers could barely explain. How could they? What words could describe the thing that hunted them? The reports would say hostile encounter. The doctors would list claw wounds and severe trauma. The officers would file it all away, under classified. But the men who had been there knew the truth. They had seen it. They had heard it scream. They had felt its claws tear through flesh and steel. And they knew it was still out there. That night, as Harris lay in the infirmary, pale and feverish, he whispered to the medic tending his wounds, "It sets real. The stories, they sets real. The devil lives in those woods." The medic didn't answer. He just adjusted the bandages and told him to rest. But word spread, soldiers talk, and soon the base was buzzing with rumors. Men swapped stories in hushed voices, sharing what they'd heard over the years, hunters who vanished, strange cries in the night, hoofprints with no trail. The legend of the Jersey Devil was alive again. And the men who had survived that night, they didn't doubt it anymore. Sergeant Miller stood alone outside the barracks the next morning, staring out toward the distant tree line of the Pine Barrens. The sun was rising, painting the sky in gold and red, but his mind was still trapped in the mist, in the shadows, in the sound of beating wings. He lit a cigarette, his hands trembling as he brought it to his lips. He told himself they had survived. He told himself his men were alive. He told himself the devil was just another mission, another enemy, another thing to forget. But deep down, he knew the truth. The Jersey Devil wasn't set, finished. It never was. And someday soon, when the mist was thick and the night was dark, the scream would come again.